If your calendar is jammed and your to-do list never ends and you still feel like your career isn't moving forward, it's time to rethink what impact actually looks like. If you're sick of working the long hours, giving it your all and still getting passed over, this episode of Leading Women in Tech is going to help you figure out where to stop wasting effort and instead allow you to start focusing on the work that actually gets you promoted. So let's talk about your daily reality. If you're like many of the women I talk to on a daily basis, you're doing more than ever. Late nights, overflowing inbox, meetings back to back. But when you finally lift your head up from the chaos, it hits you. You're not actually moving forward. You're producing, you're the go-to, but you're not getting promoted. You're not being pulled into higher level conversations, and your work, however excellent it is, isn't translating into real executive visibility. Here's the truth. No one tells women leaders early enough. Busyness doesn't equal value. And being the one who gets it done won't get you promoted, not at the executive level. That's because strategic leaders don't just work harder, they choose better. They prioritize work that moves the business forward and positions themselves for their next role. In today's episode, I'm going to help you shift out of firefighting mode and into strategic leadership. When you're snowed under and just trying to stay afloat, how do you figure out what the work is that will make a difference to your career? Well, that's what I'm going to unpack. We're talking about all the things you need to be seen and taken seriously, what impactful work actually looks like, the difference between effort and executive influence, and how to start prioritizing the work that actually gets you promoted, because staying busy will keep you exactly where you are. So do yourself one favor this week and take the next 30 minutes to learn the shifts you need to make and how to implement them to unlock your next level of career, all with less stress and less burnout. It's time to lead differently, and I'm here to show you how. So let's dive in. Let's talk about why smart, capable women like you stay stuck in this busy trap. This isn't a personality flaw. It's not because you're disorganized, bad at prioritizing, or don't have enough executive presence. It's a pattern, and a very, very common one. If you're a woman in tech in leadership, you're likely to have been conditioned into this. You've been told implicitly or explicitly that being helpful is how you prove your value. I was actually told early in my career that I couldn't afford to say no. I have to say yes to everything. That was a bit of advice given to me. One of the worst pieces of advice I've ever been given. But being that go-to person is how you don't get noticed. The work harder, taking on more, always saying yes, isn't how you earn trust. You are trustworthy. You are capable. But if your performance is always rooted in volume and not visibility and strategy, you'll eventually hit a ceiling. Maybe you're already there. Because here's the truth. Being the reliable one is a trap. You do the work no one else wants to. You fix the problems others ignore. You carry the team across the finish line. But instead of elevating your career, all that output actually crowds out your strategic influence. You're too busy to think big. You're too busy to raise your head and say, hey, there's a better way. Let me tell you about a client of mine. We'll call her Kendra. Kendra was a senior director of product at a hyperscale startup when she came to me. She was known for getting things done. Her roadmap execution was flawless. Her team loved her, but she kept getting passed over for promotion. Why? Well, because her calendar was wall to wall. She was in the weeds constantly. She had this amazing team under her. She was in charge of the whole of product. But when discussions came around about product leadership, she was excluded. And instead, leadership was given to the newly promoted VP of engineering. Oh yeah. Here's what's actually going on. Kendra had zero time for strategic planning or cross-functional influence, the exact things her boss needed to see in a VP. But her peer in engineering was making sure they were seen this way. And so he was promoted. What changed? Well, we worked together to redefine her value. Not as everything she could do, but it was where her leadership had the biggest impact on the organization. She started delegating more, saying no more, and more importantly, she started carving out time for strategic work every single week. And guess what? 6 months later, she got the promotion. I'll admit, we needed to do some strategic realignment work in the business to convince them that they should back ahead of product alongside engineering. The fact that Kendra needed to be a peer of engineering rather than engineering or product owning the whole lot, right? But by allowing herself time for strategic thinking, this became a fairly simple exercise in advocating for how the business would generate more revenue by ensuring that roadmaps were developed and fully owned by product. Kendra wasn't just seen as the reliable anymore. She was seen as the strategic leader, the visionary leader, and the organization needed to promote her. Here's the real point. They couldn't afford to not promote her by the time we did this work. And I think this is where so many of us fall down. We don't realize that promotion is far less about what we want and far more about what the business needs. If the business needs you to be promoted, you will be promoted. If you are good enough to get the promotion, but there isn't a business need, the only reason you'll get promoted is if they think you're a flight risk. And that's a hard one to sell. So if you've been stuck in the busy trap, I want you to hear this loud and clear. Your busyness is not a badge of honor. It's a sign that your leadership needs a reset, not a bigger to-do list. And while you are in busy mode, no one is seeing how you need to be promoted for the benefit of the business. In fact, quite the opposite. They think they can't do anything without you in your current role because you are so damn busy that it would cost them more to replace you. That's a narrative we've got to change. So let's dig into this a little more. One of the most frustrating realities in leadership is that being great at your job doesn't guarantee you'll get promoted. You can be the person who fixes everything, who delivers flawlessly, who everyone relies on, and still your name is not coming up in the promotion conversations. Why? Because there's a gap. We've got to diagnose that gap. There's a gap between performance and promotability. You can be great at performing, but not promotable. And that's the view that we need to change. We need to make them see that you're more than just your current job. Unless you understand how to bridge that gap and deal with the perception that you are more cost effective where you are, you'll keep doing more and more while wondering why you're still being overlooked. Here's the truth. Promotions aren't given for effort, they're given for perception. That might feel a little unfair, and yes, it's systemically broken in many ways. But if you want to rise, you need to understand how executives assess potential. They're not just looking at your output. They're looking at your impact, your influence, your executive presence. They're asking, does this person make us think differently? Are they shaping outcomes, not just delivering tasks? Do they lead with clarity and direction, or are they constantly reacting? And ultimately, will we make more money and/or save money by promoting this person? That is the big question that all the other things are feeding into. After all, thinking differently is really about saying we're ready for new ideas, shaping outcomes in a business that wants more direct impact on the bottom line. Leading with clarity and direction is about removing slack in the system, dealing with difficult situations smoothly, and leading a team swiftly through change. Every change is painful for a company, but the leaders who make a company the most money are the ones who help their team move through it faster. And that's a skill. It takes constant clarity and direction work. Here's what happens when you don't prioritize impactful work. You get stuck in a reactive mode. You handle the urgent instead of shaping the important. Your team might feel supported. In fact, you might have the most adoring team in the world, but they aren't moving through change in high performance mode. And people begin to see you as solid, helpful, reliable, but not strategic, not ready for the next level. Let me break this down a little bit more. If your calendar is full of status meetings, fixing broken processes, onboarding others, jumping in to help, but you're not spending time on cross-functional implements, thought leadership, or long-term initiatives, you're in the performance trap. If every time a new idea, process, or product line is brought in and your team resists and debates it for days on end, you're not seen as a leader that can shift through change fast and bring the team to productivity. And the perception, even if it's not fair, is she's doing great. Let's keep her there. Not she's ready for more. So let's talk about the signs you might be falling into this trap. If you find that you're rarely asked to lead strategic projects, you're left out of early planning conversations, your boss compliments your helpfulness, but never your vision, or promotions are happening around you, but you're told you're too valuable in your current role, you've got a problem, but I want you to know you're not alone. This is so common for us as women because we've been conditioned to prove ourselves through busyness, not boldness. So what do? Step 1 is I want you to name it for what it is. You've got to recognize performance versus promotion. It's a gap. You've got to stop trying to work your way out of it through more effort. Let's stop the efforting right here and right now. Busy does not make you promotable. So let's let go of that. Stop telling yourself you're stuck because you haven't prepared to work more hours, you aren't traveling enough as much as your colleagues, you're not prepared to sacrifice yet more time with your family, and that's what's holding you up. But there isn't what's holding you up. You might have been told that, but it's a story. It's a very unhelpful story. So let go of efforting your way to promotion. It does not work. And here's the thing. I've seen men effort their way to promotion. It does work for men. It doesn't work for women because we have a higher barrier to promotion. Men can effort their way there. The reason why men get coaches, okay, massive stereotypes here, massive generalizations, but one of the reasons I see men getting coaches is because they've efforted their way to a promotion, but they're not actually good enough for the job they've been given. Women, we have to show we're good enough for the job that we're going for in order to get the promotion. So we've got to do the work that men do later first. Okay, which brings me to the second step of figuring out what's going on. You've got to get clear on the real gaps that are holding you back. And by the way, that's exactly why I've created a little toolkit for you. My little quiz, the Promotion Readiness Scorecard, is a quick diagnostic tool to help you figure out where your efforts are going unseen, what to shift to finally get the recognition you deserve. You can grab it at tonicollis.com/scorecard, completely free. I'll put the link in the show notes. The goal here is just to figure out where you as an individual are maybe holding yourself up. So let's talk next about execution mode. Let's talk about this for just 1 minute. There's a cost here, which I've hinted at, but the real cost isn't about being exhausted and that it drains you. That is a real cost. But the high cost, the high and real cost, is the perception of others. It's undermining your promotability. Let's start with the tangible costs of being busy, busy, busy. When your calendar is packed with meetings, check-ins and to-dos, when you're the first to jump in and the one who's always available, always helpful, you have no time to be strategic. You're in reaction mode. You're fixing problems, not shaping what happens next. And in leadership, that's a visibility problem because people don't see your vision. They just see you hustle. And hustle doesn't get you promoted. Even worse, hustle makes them think we can't afford to not have her doing that role. Strategic influence and opportunity are what make you promotable. So here's the next layer, the strategic cost. When you're always downstream from the real decisions, reacting to what's already been set, implementing someone else's direction, you're not being seen as a peer. You're not being seen as a leader who gets and sets the vision. And the longer you stay in that place, the harder it is to reposition yourself as someone who drives the conversation. This is one of the reasons I'm such a huge advocate of transition coaching. Those first 90 days are everything to your reputation and success. Whether it's your first 90 days in a new company, a new position in an old company, or even taking on a new responsibility, how you perform and how your team responds to you in those first 90 days sets the tone for the rest of your time in that role and ultimately even that organization. Your promotability in 1 or 2 years' time is so heavily influenced by your first 90 days. And then there's the emotional toll. Resentment creeps in when others get promoted while you're carrying the team. Self-doubt that whispers, maybe I'm not ready. After you've been passed over yet again. And yes, you can be simultaneously pissed off at not being promoted and doubting yourself all in the same moment. I've seen it so many times. It's very internally toxic because you don't know whether or not you're valid in being pissed off, but there's so much self-doubt going on from years of being ignored. You're like, what is the truth here? This is a form of invisibility when your hard work goes unacknowledged again. And that is just really hard to swallow. If you find yourself nodding along to this one right now, here's what I want you to hear. Being the go-to person isn't a career strategy. It might feel good in the moment. Yes, you're capable, and it's hard to watch things fall through the cracks. But if your whole leadership identity is wrapped up in being helpful, you're building a reputation as a doer and the old reliable, not a strategic driver. And here's the kicker. When you're constantly in execution mode, when you're always busy, always doing, you're eroding your executive presence. Because executive presence isn't about being the busiest. It's about being the calm in the chaos. It's about holding the bigger picture. It's about making the room stop and listen because your words carry weight. If you're constantly on the hamster wheel, frantically reacting, never coming up for air, you're not building that kind of presence. So if you're realizing that your current way of working isn't just unsustainable, it's actually holding you back, you are right. And this is the moment to shift because your career deserves more than survival mode. So let's talk about how to identify the right work, the kind of work that actually gets you noticed, valued, and promoted. Let's talk first about how to let go of being the go-to person. The first step is to figure out what impactful work actually looks like. The kind of work that builds visibility, positions you as a strategic leader, and helps you get promoted. Because so many women I coach have never been told this. They're focused on being helpful, responsive, productive, but no one's taught them how to prioritize impactful work that's aligned with leadership. So let's break this down. There are 3 categories of work that matter if you want to grow your influence, increase your visibility, and move up. And these might sound obvious, and yet so many of us aren't spending enough time on them. The first category is the work that moves business goals forward. You might be like, what? Everything I do moves the business goals forward? Like, just hear me out. This is the work that has a clear line of sight to company or departmental objectives. If it's not traceable to OKRs, revenue, retention, scalability, efficiency, or strategic differentiation, it's probably not high impact. Busy work might feel necessary, but it's often disconnected from business outcomes. Impactful work creates momentum on what matters most to the business. So look for that first category. Is this moving the business goals forward? The second category of work is the work that creates a visibility for your leadership. This is the work that gets your name into rooms you're not in yet. Now, before you go, yeah, I know. I know a guy like that. He's the unpleasant schmoozer that no one respects. Hear me out. This isn't about being visible for the wrong reasons. It's about being visible for the right reasons. This is the work that includes presenting at leadership meetings, owning initiatives that cut across teams, the thought leadership internally or even externally, depending on your role. It isn't schmoozing, it's creating impact that's visible beyond your immediate business unit and mandate. It's recognizing that a business is a complex organism, not a group of disparate business units. If you can step away from the weeds of what your business unit is responsible for, what you and your team are supposed to be delivering, and start doing work that helps you be the glue in the organization, not the glue in your team, but the glue in an organization, you're immediately going to be more visible and make a difference as you do so. If no one sees the great work you're doing, it doesn't count in terms of promotion readiness. You have to be visible, not just valuable. The third and final category is the work that builds or influences cross-functional strategy. This is a real game changer. It isn't just cross-functional glue, it's the strategy that means the glue sticks or shifts from ordinary to something extraordinary. Companies need to evolve and change. A company that just operates tactically will be out of business in a year. Companies that evolve, compete, and stay relevant. Strategic leaders are the ones that provide this. It's not just executing, it's connecting dots across teams. It's about influencing decisions that open silos, span silos, close gaps. As leaders, we need to see the big picture and help others see it too. If you're always working inside your lane, even if you're doing it flawlessly, it's harder for others to see you as someone ready for the next level. So what can you do about this? Here's a tactical tip I use with all my clients. First up, audit your calendar. I know, stick with me here. Look at your meetings and your to-dos from the past 2 weeks and ask yourself, which of these were truly tied to business goals? Which ones elevated my visibility or voice? And remember, that's about being seen beyond your immediate remit. And which ones help shape broader strategy? Remember what we want to do here. We want to make you promotable because it's financially good for the business. If when you audit your calendar, the majority of your time is going to firefighting, internal admin, filling in gaps for underperforming peers, and always being available, that's not impact. That's being the tactical executor of the business, not the organization's evolving strategic voice. You're the glue behind the scenes, not the glue of the future. And that doesn't get you promoted. You've got to be the right kind of glue. So let me give you an example. If you respond to Slack messages within 2 minutes, that's busy. People might love you for it, but it's too busy. If instead you take the time to draft a thoughtful proposal that shifts how your team approaches a cross-functional bottleneck so they don't come back to you with this again, that's impact. If you jump into last-minute meetings to save the day, that's helpful, but possibly not strategic. Delegating the short-term fix so you can prep for a presentation on long-term product strategy, that's executive mindset work. Here's the shift. You don't need to do more, you need to choose better. In fact, I'd argue that to choose better, you actually need to be less busy. Strategic thinking doesn't happen overnight. Strategic thinking requires space. To solve problems, you need brain space, you need recovery. You need to be able to identify the right problems to solve and being seen to solve them. And honestly, if you're too busy, you don't have the brain space to do that. So let's talk about how to actually shift those priorities. Because knowing what matters isn't enough if your calendar is still being run by urgency and guilt, particularly guilt. So much of my work is around helping women step away from the guilt of letting something go or saying no to something and dealing with, oh my gosh, what are people going to say if I don't turn up to that or I say no to that? Believe me, I've been in the trap of feeling that I was just spinning and there was no time to plan or prioritize. But if you want to build your executive presence, get promoted, and finally feel like your work reflects your potential, you need new filters, new questions, new boundaries. So let's start with a few of my favorites. The first filter is what I call the CEO filter. Ask yourself, would the CEO care if I did this? Now, this comes with a caveat, which is I've worked with a few women recently whose CEOs care about the weeds, and they shouldn't. It's bad for business. It's toxic. But assuming you have a good CEO, and you probably know if you have a good CEO, would the CEO care if I did this? It's not about disrespecting the small stuff. You're listening to this because you want promoted, given where we are in this episode. And so if you want promoted, you need to think differently. And ideally, you need to become somebody who is relevant to the executive leadership teams. And that starts with the CEO. So this is about elevating yourself. It's about separating urgency from importance. And even if you are just going for the early stages of your leadership, you should still be looking at would the CEO care about this? Because ultimately, to promote you is costly. It's got to be cost effective for the business. Ultimately, a CEO should care about what you do, even if they don't know your name, low down in the organization. So I want you to ask yourself, would a CEO want me spending 2 hours formatting a slide deck or thinking critically about how to unblock a team or a cross-functional initiative that's slowing growth? High-level leaders don't focus on getting everything done. They focus on getting the right things done. They delegate the rest of it. If your calendar is filled with tasks a CEO would never notice, it's time to reassess your prioritization skills. Let's talk about the next one, the next filter, the impact multiplier question. This one's simple, but so powerful. What will still matter 90 days from now? The fire drill, the 7th Slack ping about a minor issue. They feel important and necessary right now, but will they matter in 3 months? Will they move your career forward? Will they be the thing your boss remembers in your next review? Strategic leaders invest their energy in what compounds. This is one of the most underutilized self-coaching techniques for us, and it's transformative when you apply it weekly. So always ask yourself, what will still matter 90 days from now? Now let's address the biggest traps high-performing women fall into. First of all, stop being the safety net. This is another filter. If you default into stepping in, fixing it, covering for others, or just take it on mode, you're probably overfunctioning. It feels helpful. It feels fast. In fact, it can feel very rewarding, but it's also eroding your ability to lead. Here's the reframe I want you to use. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should. If you're the glue that keeps things running, amazing. But that kind of glue doesn't get promoted. Strategic leaders delegate. This isn't about shirking responsibility. is about shifting your energy because you know you want to be up here rather than down here. So shift your energy to the highest leverage work that you can get your hands on, and delegate the rest. Which brings me to the final tool and filter, my 15-minute weekly reset. This is something I give almost every client, and it's a game changer. Once a week, pause and ask yourself, what are the 3 most impactful things I can do this week to move our strategic goals forward? What's on my calendar that could be delegated, delayed, or deleted? And where am I spending energy to feel helpful instead of impactful? You don't need an hour, 15 minutes once a week to realign, reset, lean forward. Because the truth is, you don't shift your leadership in one big leap. You shift it decision by decision, priority by priority. This is what leadership development looks like, especially for women in tech. Not working harder, not saying yes to everything, but learning to filter for impact, trust your judgment, and protect your capacity. We're going to talk now about how to tie all of this together and talk about how to lead with calm clarity instead of just reactive busyness, because this isn't about just getting promoted. It's about leading like you belong at that next level. If you're listening to this and realizing, yes, I'm constantly busy. Yes, I am exhausted. Yes, I am delivering without getting the recognition or trajectory I deserve, then I want you to hear this. Busyness is not a badge of honor. Busyness is not a badge of honor. And it's definitely not a strategy for career development. The truth is, what gets you promoted isn't just doing more, it's about what matters most. It's about showing that you're the strategic, visible, future-thinking leader that is necessary to promote rather than nice to promote. Most organizations, really the most important takeaway here is most organizations are not going to promote you because you're capable of the next level. They're going to promote you because they can't afford not to promote you. If they don't promote you, they're going to lose money. If they don't promote you, it's going to cost a business opportunity. That shift, it doesn't happen on its own. You have to take back the driver's seat of your leadership career. And that starts with saying no to being everyone's safety net. It's saying no to the busy work that doesn't move the needle. It's making space for the decisions, relationships, and visibility that gets you seen as leadership and executive ready. And as I said, if you're not sure of what to let go of or what to focus on instead, remember I have a tool for you, the Promotion Readiness Scorecard. It's a super quick diagnostic tool that's going to help you uncover why you as an individual, not generically, I've talked about so many things today, but why you as an individual are not being tapped for that next level, even if you're delivering strong results. So head to the show notes or go to tonicollis.com/scorecard. It takes 5 minutes. That's it. Give yourself the gift of clarity, whether it's strategy, strategic visibility, executive presence, or something else entirely. Go and get clarity. Do yourself that favor. Because here's the truth. You don't need to do more. You don't need to be doing more of the same. You need to do what matters and you need to be seen doing it. So go get the scorecard. And if you're ready for personalized support, if you know you're working hard but not getting promoted, head to tonicollis.com/let's-chat. Book a free strategy session with me. I do some every month. We're going to figure out what's really going on and how to lead with clarity, calm, confidence, and the kind of presence that gets you tapped for the roles that you're meant for. Because being busy, it doesn't build your legacy. Being strategic does.